Hello, dear hearts! It's time to make a hat. We've had lots and lots of requests to make a hat, and so I've been considering it very carefully, and I figured, finally, this would be the best one to start with. This is a thick-cuffed, warm, woolly, wintry hat that anybody can make for any sized head. You can make it for a doll, you can make it for a child, and you can make it for the largest headed member of the family. And if you buy enough yarn, you can make one to match for everybody. And wouldn't that be a cute holiday photo? This is a version of the same cap made in nice thin yarn. It's a tweedy, thinner, sort of a size 4 yarn that I tried out. Obviously, I've worn this for several years because it's quite cozy and soft. It's got a nice sloppy, floppy appeal. I even put a couple of little jingly danglies on the back of it. This one I made with slightly thicker yarn, and I striped it. And striping is just as easy as closing off one row and starting up another one with the new color. So you can do that if you like. Or, like today, I'm going to use a nice, thick, variegated ball of the prettiest yarn. I found this ball in a craft store years ago, and I've been waiting for the right time to bring it out. So you can use any yarn you like, you can use any hook size you like, because this pattern is less about stitch count and more about measurements. So without further ado, let's grab our yarn, grab our hooks, and head over to the craft table on this wintry day and make ourselves up some nice warm woolly caps. One of the most important things you're going to need in order to make this hat is a tape measure. Now, not everybody has one of these, but this is a pretty common thing in most sewing kits, even the cheap ones that you get at the dollar store. It doesn't have to be a super fancy one. It just has to have proper measurements on it in inches or in metric or both, whichever you like. This you are going to use in order to create all the measurements for your hat. And because this hat isn't really based on stitch count, which I know a lot of you are going to like, it's mostly based on how it fits. So this is how you figure out the circumference of the head that you are making the hat for. You take your measuring tape and you put it around the back of your head and you run it just over top of the ears, and you bring the two ends together right in the center of your forehead. This is pretty much the widest part of the cranium. And if you make a hat based on a measurement of that circumference, it'll fit. So that's what you want to do. So you take your measuring tape, wrap it around your head, just over your ears, hold the ends together right over your forehead, and pull it away. My cranium is apparently 22 inches around. So I have a small head, I suppose, or maybe it's a big head if I was a little kid. 22 inches. So that is the circumference of my head. That is the length that I'm going to make the hat band. So whatever the circumference is the length that you're going to make your hat band in. The other measurement you want is how tall you want the cuff of your hat. That you can pick. I usually make a cuff about 2.5 inches or 7 centimeters tall. You can make it as wide or as short as you want. All we're going to do is pick a measurement that you like, sort of a width of a cuff, and you can pick whatever you want, because when we get to that part I'll explain to you why you want to make that measurement. But the most important measurement is the circumference around your head. So now that you've done that, let's go to the craft table. So here we are at the craft table. Now, this is the yarn that I have chosen for my hat today. You see, I already started to get it going. I had to try and find the middle. This, I've never really seen it before. That's why I picked it up. It's called Northern Chunky. It doesn't really matter the name of it. What's important is that it's, where is it here? Ah, yes. It's a size 5. I don't know if you can see that. Size 5 in the yarn size area. And obviously it's not going to take this whole ball. I just bought this because I really liked this tweedy, variegated look, and it's thick. And the importance of it being thick is that A, it'll make for a warm hat, and B, it also makes the hat crochet up quicker. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to use a bigger hook than I normally do. This is a 5.5 millimeter hook, or an I or 9. And that one is a little bigger than the one I normally use, but I know that this will work out really well with the size of the yarn that I'm going to use. And I've got my needle, my scissors. I also have a hat that I made a while ago so that I can explain a few things to you. So this is the cuff, and because I also made it in a tweedy fashion, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that the cuff is pretty deep, and I like that. This I might make the cuff for this hat a little bit smaller, but that's a pretty standard cuff size. And the cuff, if I just grab my little measuring tape here, the cuff ends up being 2.5 inches, or almost 7 centimeters. So that, like I said, that's pretty typical hat depth. Now you can make it a little shallower if you want. You can make it a little deeper, but I'm going to go with 2.5 inches just because that's pretty much what I like to do. And that's the first little measurement I need, because this is how you determine the depth of your hat cuff. All right, you are going to take your yarn and you are going to make a slip knot. Now we wrap the yarn around our fingers, and you take the long working strand and you tuck it up and through so that you get another little loop up here. Hold on to that, take the other loop off your fingers, and grab both ends and pull, and that is a slip knot. You're going to put that on your hook like this and just tighten it up. Don't make it too tight. You want it to be able to move around your hook. And now we're going to make some chains. And because we've already decided that, for example, I want my cuff to be 2.5 inches deep, or 7 centimeters, I am going to chain a length that measures that. Now, because I don't know exactly how deep that's going to be right off the top, I'm going to start with 10 chains, and then I'll measure it. And in order to chain, you wrap your yarn around your hook, and you pull that loop through the loop that's on your hook. And you can wrap the yarn or grab the yarn however you feel comfortable. Everybody's a bit different, and there is no right way to do this. What you want to achieve is a chain, and however you get that chain is exactly up to you, whatever's comfortable. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to chain 10, and always remember to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Never count the loop on your hook, because that is not technically anything. It's just the loop on your hook. So I need 3 more. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I'm going to put my chained length down on my working surface. I'm going to grab my measuring tape, and I'm going to hold it up. So now that chained length of 10 is actually a little deeper than it needs to be. It's almost 3.5 inches. So I'm going to take out 2 chains. 1, 2. I'm going to put it back on my hook, and I'm going to remeasure it. And this is something you guys need to remember. Never be afraid to undo your work, because you want it to be perfect. You don't want something that you're not going to be happy with when you're finished. So if you're, got too many, it's fine. Take out a couple chains. So I'm remeasuring. It's almost 3 inches, but that's fine because this last chain here is going to act as my turning chain. So my foundation row is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 chains. The chain on the end will not count because it is going to become my turning chain, and the turning chain is what allows me to bring my work up to the right height. You always have to put a turning chain on the end of every row when you're single crocheting back and forth. So my actual foundation row is only going to be 7. So I'm going to single crochet into that the second chain. So there's the first chain. I'm going to skip it. There's the second chain from the hook. I'm going to put my hook through there. I'm going to wrap the yarn or grab the yarn and pull it back through that loop so that I have 2 loops on my hook, and that attaches it to that first stitch. I'm going to wrap my yarn and pull it through both. And if you need help with the single crochet, I invite you to check out the single crochet tutorial. There's also a slip knot tutorial, and I will post both of those down below in the comments. For the rest of you, we are going to single crochet back along this whole base line, and when you get to the end you want to count. So for me, I'm going to have 7 stitches because remember the 8th chain is my turning chain and doesn't count. So I should have, and let's count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, 7. Now, here's where the magic begins. We're going to chain 1, because this is our turning chain. We're going to flip our work, because this hat band is worked back and forth. And instead of working through the whole stitch, now this is the whole stitch, and you see that there's both of the loops of the top of the stitch sit on top of the hook if you work the whole stitch. But we're not going to work the whole stitch. In order to get this nice ribbed effect, we are going to work into the back loops only. And that is this thing back here. So remember, we chained 1, so this first chain we skip because that's technically not a stitch. We're going to work into the first stitch, but the back loop only. And we're going to single crochet like normal. And then we're going to work into the back loop of the next stitch and single crochet like normal, and then into the back loop of the next stitch, and you're going to do that right the way across this whole row. Now the purpose of working into the back stitch, or the back loop of the stitch I should say, is that it will create this really nifty ribbed effect, and that will actually give your hat band a bit of elasticity, and that's really important if you know, you want your hat to be comfortable. So once you get to the end, always count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Chain 1, flip your work, and you are going to continue working into the back loops only. The back loop will always be the loop away from you. The front loop is the one closest to you, but the back loop is the one that's away from you. You're going to work single crochets into every back loop of each stitch all the way across, and when we get to the end of this row, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about when I say this nice ribbed effect, because the act of only working into the back loops leaves the front loops exposed. And there you can see it already. There's this nice ridge effect happening, and you are just going to keep doing this back and forth and back and forth. Chain 1 at the end of every row, flip your work, single crochet into the back loop only, and you're going to work back and forth in this manner until your hat band, this length of fabric you're creating, has measured as long as the circumference of your head. Now in my situation, that's 22 inches. So every so often you're going to want to pause, put it down on your working surface, grab your measuring tape, and measure it. Don't stretch it. You don't want to stretch your work because it is going to have a little bit of give. So if you're not bang on the right number, you're a little over, a little under, that's okay. It's still going to fit. So far, I've crocheted 1.5 inches of hat band, and I have 22 inches to go. So I am going to keep working as a turning chain, turning my work, and working into the back loops only. with single crochet. Every single one of my rows will be 7 stitches long because that is the base chain number that works for me. And whatever yours is, make sure that it's consistent all the way through your hat band. And I'm going to work back and forth until I have a hat band that's 22 inches long. And I will see you in a few minutes. Okay, I have crocheted a length of hat band by going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, single crochet through the back loops only. Now, I am going to measure it, and as we know from my previous measurement, I have a 22-inch circumference around my head, and that, without stretching it, works out to exactly 22 inches. And I know because this has a little bit of stretch that that will fit me very comfortably. Now, if you don't have a decent measuring tape, or you want to be absolutely sure, what you can do is just pull up the loop and take your hook out of it so that it doesn't unravel on you. Pick it up and wrap it around your head like this. Same place that you measured before. You want it to go behind your head, just a little over your ears, and meet in the center of your forehead. Now, if it feels a little loose, take a couple rows out. If it feels a little tight, add a couple rows. This is the best possible way to make sure that your hat band is going to fit you if you're making this hat for yourself. If you're making it for someone else and you haven't got their head, you're going to have to use the measuring tape and hope that it works out. But it will, because if you measure and you go with the measurement, it'll work out. This always has a little bit of stretch, so it's always okay to err on the side of too few rows than too many rows, because you don't want it to like sit on their chin. Unless, of course, they don't mind rolling up their cuff. So you know what? Hats are pretty flexible. Don't stress out about it. Try to make it about the right length, and everything else will work out from there, I promise. Let's go back to the table. All right, we're back at the table, and now we're going to close up our hat band. So this is how you do that. You're going to take your hat band, and you're going to take your two ends and put them together like this. Make sure that you haven't twisted it, okay? And you're going to put your hook back in your loop and make sure it's small again. If you didn't single crochet at the end of this row, go back or I should say, if you didn't chain one at the end of this row, make sure you did, because you still need that chain one at the end of that row there. And now we're going to close up this edge, and you're going to continue working through the back loops of this last row that you made, and you're just going to put your hook through the underside of the chain. So this was the first foundation row that you made, and these are all chains. So you're not going to have an exact stitch, so you're just going to stick it right through the bottom of that chain. Grab your yarn, and you're going to try to keep that other little tail out of the way. Just slip stitch back through everything. So again, I'm going to pick up the back loop of the row that I just worked and put it through the stitch opposite me in the which is the foundation chain row of the other side. Wrap your yarn and pull it back through both. So back loop, chain row, grab the yarn and slip stitch. Back loop through the chain row, wrap the yarn and slip stitch. Back loop, chain row, wrap the yarn, slip stitch. And you're going to do that all the way up the two sides, slip stitching them together so that when you're finished, and remember to chain one when you're done, you have closed up your entire hat band. So now, I'm just going to make that loop bigger there so you can see what I'm talking about. You have this nice little edge that's barely noticeable, but this will be the back of your hat. But it's a really nice, clean way to put the two edges together, and you have this awesome rib happening. Now, here's the other cool part. This is the only time you actually have to do a whole lot of counting. We're going to single crochet into the end of every single row all the way around this hat, and we're going to build the rest of the hat on from here. Now you can count, you'll know ahead of time how many, if you counted all of your rows And you can do that by looking at the ribs. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, etc. If you counted all of your rows, then that's exactly how many stitches you're going to have around your hat. But if you didn't count all your rows, don't worry about it, because you're going to count them now. So we're going to put our hooks back into our loop. Remember that you chained one when you finished slip stitching both your ends together. You chained one. And we're going to single crochet in that same space. So just dig your hook in anywhere it'll go and make a single crochet. And that's the other beauty about this this little transitional row. You're going to put a single crochet in the end of every row. So the down row is a row, the ridge part is a row. So it's one here, one here, one here, one here. And you're going to just find anything that you can make a nice comfortable stitch through, sort of the end little loop of every single row. And it isn't going to be it's going to look a little funny, but at the end you won't even notice it, because this is what we call a transitional row. So it's not the easiest thing. You have to go looking for stitches. If you've crocheted nice and loosely, it shouldn't be too difficult. But always, if you get confused, just stop and go, okay, here's a ridge row. I need to make a stitch at the very top of this one. And you're only going to put one in the end of every ridge row and in the end of every under ridge row, I guess. These are all rows, and you're going to put one single crochet in the end of each row. And you're going to do that all the way around. And this is the transitional row between hatband and the rest of the hat. Okay, and that is the transitional row. So what you will have done is you will have single crocheted a single crochet stitch in the end of every single row. So a ridge row, an under ridge row, a ridge row, an under ridge row. And if you counted all the way along, great. If you didn't, that's okay. What you want to see is a nice, loose, even row. So there's no buckling, there's no extra looseness. It's not like you put in too many stitches or too few. You want one for the end of every single row. Now you can go ahead and count those stitches, just so you have the stitch count in your head. You know exactly how many you should have at the end of every row, and I recommend that. But what you're going to do now is you're going to build the rest of the hat. Now this hat is pretty standard toque size for an adult, and if you discount the cuff, then the whole hat itself is about 6 inches deep from cuff to the top of the hat. Now this allows for a little bit of slouch, a little bit of movement. If you wanted, you could turn the cuff up, and a lot of people like to do that. So I recommend 6 inches, or if you're going by metric, 15 centimeters, to be the actual depth of your hat from the point of your cuff to the top. So if you include your cuff, let's say for me it's 2.5 inches, then you add 2.5 inches in the 6 inches, and that's the entire depth of your hat. But right now we're just focusing on this bit. So for an adult, good standard, 6 inches. 7 or 8 for a larger head, like a big male head with a lot of hair, and 5 inches for a child. And if you're going to make it for an infant, then maybe 4 inches, but nothing too much more, because mummies always like to roll up the cuffs on their babies' hats anyways, so they can see what's going on. So that is what we're going to do. You are going to now grab your hook, continue single crocheting in the round, so you're not going to join rows with a slip stitch. You're just going to locate the first single crochet you made to start your transition row. There it is for me. And you're just going to single crochet directly into that, and you're going to single crochet in each stitch all the way around until your hat, so cuff not included, your hat body has reached 6 inches in height. All right, so I have completed the 6 inches, and I'll show you here, of single crochet in every stitch around, nothing fancy, all in the round, no joining of rows, and that from the top of the cuff to the end of my work is now 6 inches or 15 centimeters. That's as tall as I'm going to make it. So now I'm going to start to close in the top of the hat. And we're going to do that using a couple of techniques. First of all, we're going to shrink the number of stitches we have by decreasing. So we're going to single crochet 2 together by pulling up a loop in the first stitch and then pulling up a loop in the stitch right next to it. So you've got 1, 2, 3 loops on your hook. Then you wrap your yarn and you pull it back through all 3 loops. And that single crochets 2 stitches together. That's a decrease. You're just going to single crochet normally in the stitch next to that. Try not to split your yarn. And then you're going to single crochet 2 together across the next 2 stitches. And then single crochet in the next stitch and 2 together over the next 2 stitches and then 1 into the next stitch. And you're going to repeat this: single crochet 2 together, single crochet 1, single crochet 2 together, single crochet 1. You're going to repeat that all the way around for this row. It doesn't matter what your stitch count is. We're just shrinking the number by about 1/3. Okay, I'm just coming around, finishing that row of decrease, and I'm just putting in the last few stitches. And I know that I'm getting back to the beginning of that row for 2 reasons. One, I can see that that's the first place that I did 2 stitches together. So you can see there's kind of like a cool little overlap thing that happens. The other thing is that I left my tail. So this is sort of where I know that I joined my 2 rows. This is where I know that I started my single crochet in all the rounds, around and around and around. And so when I get back up to just above this little tail, then I know that I have completed a row. And I am going to now single crochet 2 together all the way around, just to decrease it that much more. So now we're going to cut your stitch count in half, whatever that stitch count may be, and it doesn't really matter as long as it looks right. So you're going to single crochet 2 stitches together all the way around this entire row. Alright, so I'm just finishing that row of single crocheting 2 stitches together, and I'm going to do 2 more, and that brings me right back to my beginning, because there's my beginning. And if you go up, now it doesn't have to be exact, so I don't want you guys out there stressing about the fact that you haven't put in too many or you put in not enough, or don't worry about it. All you're doing is closing in the top of your circle, and I think that's closed enough for me now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a decent length of yarn, maybe 30 centimeters or so, 12 inches. Doesn't have to be very much. And you're going to slip stitch into the next stitch. So whatever stitch that might be for you, just grab your yarn, pull it back through that stitch, and then you're just going to pull the whole tail through that new loop, and that closes that off. You're going to grab your yarn needle, and this is kind of the fun part. All you're going to do is take your needle and your yarn, and you're going to weave it in and out of each stitch all the way around, just like that. And because you double crocheted, or I should say because you single crocheted 2 stitches together, you've got like these sort of nice open little spaces underneath the tops of all the stitches, so it's really easy to see those stitches. And you're just going to go in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, all the way around until you get back to the beginning. And then you're going to cinch it shut. Cinch that whole circle shut. Alright, so here I am back at the beginning, and I'm just going to pull gently, and look at that. Doesn't that just cinch that top together so nicely. Now you have this perfect little round, almost looks like a flower. It's perfect, perfect top, and easy to do. So all you want to do now is make sure that it's nice and tight, and you're going to just pick up a few stitches across the top of that circle that you made. Just sort of, doesn't matter, that doesn't have to be really perfect. Just go over, back and forth over top of that little sort of hole a couple times, just so that it doesn't like open up or unravel. This doesn't have to be super perfect because we're going to cover it with a little doohickey. So just do it back and forth a couple times with your yarn and your hook, or I should say your needle here. And once you've done it enough and you're pretty satisfied, just take your needle and your yarn, go right down through the top somewhere, out into the bottom of your hat, and pick up a loop anywhere you like. Knot your yarn a couple times, and just weave it into some of those stitches. Doesn't matter where. And once you've woven in your yarn, and you're satisfied with that, then just snip off any of the excesses. Now, the only other thing we're going to do is we don't need to worry about this tail anymore. It's not marking our spot for us, so we're just going to weave it in. So I like to pick up a couple stitches with my yarn needle, then weave in the little tail, and then just pick up a few more stitches. Don't want it to go all the way through to the front. And maybe I'll go up here. And once I feel like that's in there good enough, now I'm going to snip off that excess as well. There! Oh my gosh, this is such a cute hat. Perfect toque. Ah, I love it. One thick, cuffed, warm, woolly cap, all in crochet, and big enough for me. Of course, you can make one for any member of the family, really, from the biggest headed person to the smallest headed person, right down to somebody's doll. I hope you like this pattern. We certainly do. We've got another tutorial coming very shortly on hat doodads. We're going to make all sorts of funny little squiggly things like this to hang on the back of your hat. And not just these, we've got other ones in store too, but that's a surprise. So remember to tune in and watch. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and remember to share our videos with your crafty friends, because that is just the nicest thing anybody can do for me. If you also want to follow us on Etsy or Google Plus or Pinterest and Instagram, you can do that too at Jayda InStitches. And on the other three, Google Plus and Instagram and Pinterest, you can also post your pictures of the things you've made, and I love it when you guys do that because that is just unbelievable. Anyway, that's all for now. Please remember to tune in next time for our upcoming doodad tutorial, and we will see you again very shortly. Bye, everybody!